The coffee had gone cold. Emily Carter wrapped both hands around the mug anyway, not because it offered warmth, but because it gave her something to hold. The cafe was called The Lantern, a name that promised coziness, and delivered on it fairy lights wound around exposed brick. A chalkboard menu, with crooked letters, tables small enough that strangers' elbows touched. On any other night, she might have liked it here. She had been waiting for 47 minutes. She knew this because she had a habit, born from years of back-to-back meetings, of noting exact times. The blind date was scheduled for 7. It was now 7:47. The waiter, a young man with kind eyes and a slightly embarrassed expression, had already brought her a second coffee. On the house. And she had not missed the pity in the gesture. Outside, Brooklyn was doing what Brooklyn did in late December, trying its best to be beautiful, and mostly succeeding. Snow fell in that particular New York way, slow and deliberate, as though it too had considered the dramatic potential of the evening, and decided to lean in. The windows of the Lantern held the street in a soft frame cabs with their orange lights, a family pulling a small child on a sled, a couple walking with their arms locked and their breath making clouds. Emily looked at all of it the way she looked at quarterly reports, with full attention and no particular feeling. She was 36 years old. She ran a company of 400 people. She had, on 3 separate occasions, appeared on lists with the word "powerful" in the title. She had also, 8 months ago, signed divorce papers in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a building she half-owned, using a pen her lawyer handed her, while her ex-husband sat on the other side of the table looking at the ceiling. She had not cried. She had considered it a point of professional pride. Her friend Natalie had arranged this. "Just coffee," Natalie had said. "He's a good person. I promise you." Emily, just meet him. Christmas Eve, nothing serious. Just stop being alone for one evening. Emily had said she was not alone. She was unencumbered. And Natalie had said that was the saddest thing she'd ever heard. And Emily had said, fine, send me his number. She had not called. She had only texted the address. The waiter drifted past and she caught his eye and smiled in a way that said, "I'm fine. Please don't look at me with that expression anymore." He nodded and moved on. At the next table, a couple in matching scarves were taking a photograph of their food. 2 older women near the window were sharing a dessert and laughing. A man alone at the bar was reading a book with a red cover. Emily had not brought anything to read. She had not thought she would be alone long enough to need something to read. Her phone showed no messages. She thought, without intending to, of something her ex-husband had said 2 years before the divorce, during one of those quiet, honest conversations that happen sometimes at the end of a marriage, when both people have stopped performing and have not yet started fighting. "You don't wait for anything," he had said, not unkindly. "Not for people, not for situations to change. You decide, and you act, and the world either catches up or it doesn't. I admire it. I also," and here he had paused, "I also find it very lonely to be around." She had not known what to do with that sentence at the time. She still didn't. The cafe door opened. Cold air moved across the room. He was not what she had imagined. She had not spent much time imagining, but there had been a few seconds of it on the cab ride over. Half watching the city slide past, and whatever she had pictured, it was not this. A man in his mid-30s, jacket dark with wet snow, hair disordered, breathing as though he had been running. He stood in the doorway for a moment and looked around the cafe with the particular expression of a person who expects to be judged and has decided not to care. He found her table. Their eyes met. His face did something complicated: relief, embarrassment, apology, all arriving at once. He came over. He pulled out the chair across from her and did not sit immediately. He stood, jacket dripping slightly on the floor, and said, "I'm sorry. I know how this looks. My daughter was in the emergency room." Emily looked at him. "Is she all right?" she asked. Something shifted in his face. He had clearly been braced for something else. "She is now. Asthma. It comes on fast sometimes in the cold. I stayed until her breathing settled, and then I probably should have called. I have your number." I should have called, he exhaled. I'm Daniel Brooks. Emily Carter. He sat down. His hands, she noticed, were slightly trembling, not from cold. Or not entirely from cold. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that had probably been very young-looking at 20, and now carried its years honestly. There was plaster dust on the left knee of his jeans. I'm going to understand completely if you want to leave, he said. The waiter appeared. Daniel looked at the menu for exactly 2 seconds and ordered water. Emily studied him. You drove here? Took the subway. Walked the last part. He ran a hand through his wet hair. Natalie said, You lived in Manhattan. I thought it seemed easier for you. She had, in fact, driven a company car. The irony of this landed quietly. How old is your daughter? 7, Emma. He said the name the way parents say their children's names, with a particular kind of gravity, as though the word itself carried weight. She's with my neighbor now, Mrs. Petrov. She keeps cookies in a tin for Emma, so Emma is probably fine, more than fine. A small, involuntary smile. Better than me. The waiter brought his water. Daniel wrapped his hands around the glass. Why did you wait? He asked. She had not expected that. She had expected apology, explanation. The careful social architecture of a first date that was going poorly, not this a direct question, quiet and genuine, with no performance behind it. I don't know, she said. Which was the truth. He nodded, as though her answer was reasonable. Outside, the snow continued. They talked for an hour and a half. Later, she would not be able to reconstruct the exact sequence of it, what led to what, which disclosure opened the door for the next. That was the nature of certain conversations. They followed their own logic, subterranean, and you arrived somewhere without quite knowing the route. She learned that he had studied architecture, that he had graduated, worked for a firm in Manhattan for 4 years, done well, that his wife, Claire, had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when Emma was 11 months old, and that over the following 2 years, treatment, remission, relapse, the hospital stays that stretched into weeks, he had gradually moved his work to the edges of his life, first cutting hours, then freelancing, then stopping entirely. That after Claire died, he had needed to be home, reliable, present, and so he had started working with his hands instead, plumbing, initially, because someone from the building had mentioned a job, and he needed money immediately. That he had been doing it for 5 years now. Do you miss it? She asked. The architecture. He thought about it. I miss the drawings, he said. The way a space looks on paper before it exists. Everything's still possible. He paused. The actual work, the client meetings, the approvals, the way something always goes wrong between the drawing and the building. I don't miss that. What does Emma think you do? She thinks I fix things that are broken. He smiled. Which is accurate. Emily told him about the company not in the way she usually described it, the metrics and the growth curve, but something closer to the actual experience of it. The way she had started it, at 29, with a business partner, who was now her largest shareholder, and occasionally her adversary. The way she thought about it the last thing before sleep, and the first thing on waking. The way her ex-husband had once said that the company was the most intimate relationship she had ever had, and she had initially been offended by this, and had later concluded he was not wrong. Daniel listened. He did not offer solutions or pivot to his own parallel experience. He just listened, which was rarer than it should have been. Natalie said you were divorced, he said. 8 months ago. Was it? He stopped. Sorry. That's not my question to ask. It was mutual, she said. Which is another way of saying it was nobody's fault, and also completely our fault. He wanted a different kind of life than the one I was building. He wanted someone who came home. She looked at the table. I was trying to be fair to him. I kept thinking he's not wrong. He's not wrong to want that. It just wasn't what I could give. The cafe had thinned out. The couple, with the matching scarves, had gone. The older women by the window were putting on their coats. Emily's second coffee was fully cold now, and she had not noticed when that had happened. Daniel had ordered only water. She had seen him look at the menu twice, and both times choose nothing. It was subtle, the calculation of a man who was always watching the cost of things, and she felt something shift in her chest. Something she didn't immediately name. "Tell me about Emma," she said. His entire expression changed. He talked about his daughter the way he had talked about the architectural drawings, with a kind of precise, wondering attention, as though he was still slightly astonished that she existed. She was 7 3/4, which she insisted was different from 7. She had her mother's dark hair, and Daniel's insistence on naming things correctly. Not a bird, but a white-throated sparrow. She had been reading since 4 1/2, which had alarmed her pediatrician, who called it atypical, and Emma, who had been listening from behind the door, had come in and said atypical means not usual, and not usual doesn't mean wrong, and the pediatrician had not known how to respond. She was currently on a mission to read every book about weather. Not children's books. Actual meteorology books, the ones with the charts. She had informed Daniel last week that the naming of hurricanes was arbitrary and unscientific, and she had a better system. Emily found herself smiling. "She sounds like a lot," she said. "She's everything," he said, simply. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and immediately his face went into the particular attentiveness of a parent. Emily watched him. "Is she all right?" She's asking if he looked at the screen, and his expression did something she couldn't quite read. He showed her the phone. The text, from Mrs. Petrov, included a voice message from Emma. "Tell Daddy that Mrs. Petrov says he's on a date. Tell him I want to know." "Is the lady nice?" A silence sat between them. "What should I tell her?" he asked. Emily considered. "Tell her she's being nosy." He typed this. A pause. Then his phone lit up with a string of laughing emojis, and then, "That means yes. Nosy means you're interesting." Emily looked at this for a moment. She was aware of something happening to her, not dramatically. Not in the cinematic way that things happened in the stories people told about love. Something quieter, the way a room changes when someone opens a window, an almost imperceptible shift in the quality of the air. "She drew a picture this morning," Daniel said. He was looking at his phone with that particular mixture of love and helplessness that parenting seemed to produce. Before she knew about tonight, she was drawing her family. He paused. She drew herself and me, and then she drew an extra figure and labeled it Daddy's new friend in quotation marks. In quotation marks, she's been learning about how quotation marks show uncertainty. He shook his head. "She's 7 3/4. 7 3/4. He looked up. "I don't tell you this I'm not trying to." He stopped. "I just thought it was funny. That she knew, somehow. Before I did." Emily didn't say anything. Through the window, a street musician was playing something slow and almost recognizable, the notes arriving muffled through the glass. The snow had slowed, but not stopped. The lantern had become very quiet around them. "I should go," Daniel said. "Emma should be in bed. She had a difficult evening." He began to reach for his jacket. "Thank you for staying." "You didn't have to." He stood. Emily looked at her cold coffee. She looked at the door. She looked at him. Standing there with his damp jacket and his honest face. This man who had left his career to be home, who talked about his daughter like she was a small miracle, who had ordered only water all evening, without acknowledging it once. She said, "Can I come with you?" He looked at her as though he had misheard. "To make sure Emma is all right," she added. "And because she stopped, I don't have anywhere to be." This was true, and also not the whole truth. She had an apartment that was very clean and very quiet, and very much the kind of apartment that said a person lives here who is very certain of herself, and she did not want to go back to it tonight. They walked to the subway through snow that had softened from falling to drifting. Emily was wearing heels, which she had chosen the way she chose everything for how they made her look, which was tall and composed, and they were now making small punctures in the snowpack on the sidewalk. She did not mention this. Daniel matched his pace to hers, without drawing attention to the fact that he was doing it. On the train, they stood and held the same pole because there were no seats, and the car rocked and jerked in the familiar way of the Brooklyn-bound F, and around them, people carried shopping bags and tired children, and the specific end of Christmas Eve energy of a city winding down. Someone's bag of groceries split and oranges rolled across the floor, and 3 strangers helped gather them. And there was a brief moment of goodwill that happened, and then dissolved, the way those moments do on subways. Daniel caught one of the oranges near Emily's foot and handed it back, and the man receiving it said, "Merry Christmas," and Daniel said, "Merry Christmas" back, and Emily watched this small transaction and thought about how long it had been since she had been on a subway. 2 years, maybe 3. She had a car. There was always a car. Before the car, there had been taxis, and before the taxis, before the company, before the growth, before the lists with powerful in the title, she had taken the subway every day, had known the particular grammar of it. When to move toward the door, how to angle your body in a crowded car. The unspoken protocol of headphones and eye contact. She had forgotten she used to know how to do this. "You're cold," Daniel said.